So, good morning, everyone. Today, we are going to take a quick recap of your chapter 8. So, that is the unit 4, that is writing embedded code and business model. So, here in this chapter, we are going to look for the topics, that is, what do you mean by memory management? What are the types of memory? How you can make the best use of RAM? What is performance and battery life? Libraries and debugging. So, let's begin. So before we start memory, first let us know what do you mean by memory. So when we talk about word memory, you can in very simple words say it is just like a human brain. Okay. So basically when we talk about memory, it is something which will help you to store the data, process the information and get the results. So that is something which is related to memory. So when I talk about computer memory, it is also a storage space into your computers where the data is processed. It takes some instructions and on the basis of instruction, you will do the processing. Whatever processing is being done, that is also stored into your memories. There is an important activity that is your memory management, which is very much important. And it is basically a process which will help you to control and coordinate, you can say, your computer memories. So basically, how does it do the coordination? It assigns portions of the memory, which is also called as blocks, or at times it is also called as modules, to various programs which are running, okay, so that the overall system performance is maintained and you can access the piece of code or you can say any instructions when faster. So memory management basically resides into your hardware, that is nothing but your operating system, and all your programs and application use this memory. Okay. So when we talk about memory in terms of your embedded system platforms, or you can say into your normal computing platform, the big difference between the two is that your embedded system platform lack memories. They always comes in the size of memory which is in kilobytes. Okay, you can see most of the memories of your Arduino or you can say your Raspberry Pi, they are usually of 10 kilobytes. So this is usually referred as resource constrained devices because they lack some memory. However, if I talk about normal computing memory, the laptops and servers, they come up with big memories. This is usually in gigabytes, terabytes, and so on. So that's a big difference between your memory in terms of your actual computing environment and your embedded system platforms. So here over your screens, you can see that the memory is divided into two parts. First is the primary memory and second is secondary memory. So when I talk about primary memory, it is also referred as main memory because it holds the data and instructions and all the operations which you are performing currently over your computers is saved into your primary memory. It has a limited capacity and the data is lost when the power is switched off. Okay, so basically this type of memories are made up of semiconductor devices and they are not as fast as your registers. Okay, so data and the instructions which is required to be processed resides into your main memory and it is divided into two subcategories, that is your ROM and RAM. Next we have secondary memory. So when I talk about secondary memory, they are also called as external memory or at times they are also called as backup memory because these are the external memories which are added to a system just to enhance the overall working of your systems and to increase the performance. The reason is that no doubt this type of memories are slower than your primary memory. However, these memories will make sure that all the information which you are saving into it is stored permanently because this is something which is of non-volatile in nature. And when we talk about accessing, the CPU will not directly access the memory here. In this case, they will first access input-output routines, then the contents of your secondary memories will be transferred to the main memories. Okay. Example is hard disk drive, flash disk drive, DVD and pen drive. So all the secondary devices are something which will help you to back up your memories. It will help you to have an access to this data at any point of time. So when I talk about primary memory, it is divided into two, that is your ROM and RAM. So first we'll start with ROM. So when I talk about ROM, it stands for read-only memory. So it's self-explanatory. It will just read the data, but it will not write the data. Okay. This type of memory is non-volatile in nature. That means the information, whatever is stored in this memories, okay, it is there for a longer time. So once you have written the instructions into it, you cannot change them. It is will there for a longer time. So most of the common examples of this type of memory is all your washing machine, your micro ovens, your calculators, and all the peripheral devices are the part of it. So when we talk about types of ROM, it is categorized into three: PROM, EPROM, and EEPROM. So when we talk about PROM, it stands for Programmable Read-Only Memory, which is used for programming by the users. Okay. Once you have programmed something into this PROM, the data and instructions which is there into it cannot be changed later. Next is EPROM, that stands for Erasable Programmable Read-Only Memory. So it is something which is used that whatever you have reprogrammed, okay, you can erase it with the help of the ultraviolet rays. But to reprogram it, you have to make sure that all the contents which has been previously saved into the memory need to be deleted. Then only it can start with the reprogramming process. Last is EEPROM. So when I talk about EEPROM, it refers to electrically erasable programmable read-only memory. So whatever data which you want to erase, you have to erase them with the help of electrical fields. Here you don't need ultraviolet rays or light, which you used to need in EEPROM. However, the best part is that in this case of EEPROM, you can erase portions of the chip. You don't need to erase everything which is stored previously for reprogramming, which was there into your EEPROM. Next, we are moving to RAM. So when I talk about RAM, it stands for Random Access Memory. It is internal memory of your CPU, which helps you to store the data, program, and save the instructions as well. So this is a read-write memory. Remember, ROM is just read memory, whereas if I talk about RAM, it is a read-write memory. So when we talk about read-write memory, it stores the data until the machine is working. So as soon as your machine is switched off, the data is erased. When we talk about access time with respect to RAM, it is independent of whatever computer applications which are running over it, what storage location they are accessing into the memory. So that is independent. So every application which is accessing the RAM memory depends, and according to that, access time keeps on changing. Always remember, RAM is volatile in nature. Once the data is stored in it, it is lost when we switched off the computer, or if in case if there is any kind of a power failure, which happens frequently, because of that reason also, the data which is stored get lost. So that is why most of the time we use UPS, and that helps you to act as a backup for the same. So when we talk about physical form factor, and the amount of the data which RAM can hold is always small in nature in both the cases. So when we talk about RAM, over your screens you can see it is divided into two types, that is your static RAM and dynamic RAM. Okay. So when I talk about static RAM, the word itself tells its meaning that the memory contents which are there will remain into your devices as long as the power is being supplied. However, the data will get lost once the power is not there because it is of volatile in nature. SRAM uses 6 transistors and there is no capacitors. That is for the reason, since you are using transistor, there is no leakage, they don't need powers. So in SRAM, you don't need to refresh it on the regular basis. However, when we talk about manufacturing cost, it is always higher as compared to your DRAM. So in short, we can conclude that SRAM has a longer life. You don't need to refresh them. They are faster in terms of accessing. It uses your cache memory. They are usually in a large in size. They are expensive in nature and they require higher power consumption. Next, we move to the second part, that is your DRAM. So when I talk about DRAM, it refers to dynamic RAM. In case of dynamic RAM, you need to continuously refresh it to maintain the data. So for this, you have something called as refresh circuit, which will rewrite your data several hundred times per second. Okay, these are the type of memories which are usually cheap and they are smaller in size. And when we talk about memory cells, they're composed of one capacitor and one transistor. So please remember the difference between, in SRAM you have 6 transistors and there is no capacitor, but in case of DRAM you have one capacitor and one transistor. So we can conclude that when we talk about DRAM, they have a shorter data lifetime. They need to be refreshed continuously, which is done with the help of a refresh circuit. They are slower as compared to SRAM. They are smaller in size. They are less expensive and they consume less power. So we can see that both of them are working exactly opposite of it. So depending on your requirement, you have to select what you want to go for, whether you're going to go for SRAM or whether you're going to go for a DRAM. So when you talk about access time which is faster, SRAM is something which has a faster access time. So when you want fast working of your RAM memory, then you can go with SRAM. So let's move to the next. Next we have is stack versus heap. So whenever I talk about heap, you can say that is nothing but a region of your computer that is not managed automatically. Okay, so here you have to use some functions, you can say, and with the help of that functions you are going to have an access to heap memory. Okay, so in C++ we used to have two functions that is called as malloc and calloc, and using that we are used to allocate the heap memory. Okay, so basically when we talk about heap, it is just like a free floating memory. When we talk about stack, this is something which is used into your modern computer system, where your system will use each thread and which has a reserved memory, and this reserved memory usually referred as stack. Okay, so we can say that heap is used by all the parts of the application, whereas when I talk about stack memory, it is used only by one thread of execution. So we'll start a quick difference between your stack versus heap. So the first differentiating characteristic is information stored into the memory. So in case of stack, there will be always storing of your information in linear structure or in a sequential structure. When we talk about heap, in case of heap, the information which is stored into the memory will be either dynamic allocation or it will be random in nature. Second characteristic, memory allocation for variables. So when I talk about memory allocation for variables, in case of stack, it will be explicitly allocated for all the automatic variables and all the blocks which are local to it. In case of your heap, it is explicitly managed by the variables that can be either at the time of variables creation or either they are initialized at the runtime. So the big difference here in second point, that is memory allocation for variable. In case of stack, it is explicitly allocated, but in case of heap, it is explicitly managed. So that's a big difference between the two. Explicitly allocation and explicitly managing. Third characteristic we have is memory used. So in case of stack, the memory which is used is static memory. Okay, so which means that the memory allocation will take place at the compile time before the program execution will take place. In case of heap, the memory which is used is dynamic memory. So here, whatever memory you have, it can be allocated, and when you want to free that memory, you can done it in the random manner or you can do it in the random order. Next characteristic is calling function, or you can say calling mechanism. So in case of stack, whenever a new function is called, we are always going to refer it as a block, and this block is going to be pushed into your stack along with your local variables and the function value which it is returning. So you can see over your screen, the example is given there of the stack. Similarly, when we talk about calling mechanism in case of heap, the memory can be allocated to your unused objects, and these objects are usually at times referred as block, and they can be freed later whenever required. So in case of heap, we are going to allocate the memory to the objects which have been not used so far, and later on you can even free those blocks if you think they are no more required by you. Next characteristic we have is access time. So when I talk about access time with respect to the stack memory, it is faster to access because whatever you are storing into your stack memory is stored in a linear structure fashion or into your sequential fashion. So it is very quick to access them. However, they are using one more mechanism, that is last and first out order. So whatever comes last is removed first. Okay, so with this, you are accessing the memory in a very sequential and linear order. So here the access time is going to be very fast. However, in case of heap, if I talk about access to the memory, it is slower than your stack. The reason is that here we are using a dynamic allocation technique, and here in dynamic allocation, there are many blocks or there are many unused objects. So you manually have to tell the blocks, or you can say objects, that which memory they have to access. So this is something which is done manually rather than automatically. That is why it is slower in nature. Okay, so in all we can conclude that if you want to have a proper memory allocation, then we should go for a stack allocation technique rather than going for heap, because in heap you have to specify all the time, but in stack you don't need to do the same. It is done and managed automatically by the stack. Let's move to the next. Next we have making the most of your RAM. So when I talk about making the most of the RAM, it refers to that how you can make the best use of your RAM. So as we all know that RAM is a working computer memory for your applications which you are running. So it is very much important, and you can say essential, that you have to make the most of your RAM. That is how you can make the best utilization of the RAM, how you can make it work fast. Okay. So as we all know that when we talk about your embedded devices, they always comes with few RAM size. They are usually in few kilobytes. So most of the time, since they suffer from this limitation, your devices misbehave or they crash at times because they have a less RAM size. The more is the RAM size, the more your applications will run smoothly and they will run faster, because the application requires memory to function it, and that memory is taken from your RAM because that is your primary memory. Okay, so it is very much important that you have to always use some mechanism that will help you to increase your RAM size. It will help you to have a reliability of the system. Okay, so for this, you have to always make sure that whenever you are allocating space, okay, you should always go for an allocation that will be part by part, and you should not go for the entire allocation, because if you are doing part by part allocation, in that case, once one part is completed, you can end it off, you can start with another part. So whatever allocation you are doing, it should be part by part so that you can work with it, and at a single point of time, much of your RAM memory is not utilized. Okay, like you can say, if you suffer from a low RAM size, so instead of downloading the entire page into the memory at once, you can download it part by part, have an access to it, complete your work, end the task, and then start with the next one. Okay. However, there are now many mechanisms which are there which will help you to increase, or you can say you can extend your RAM size. But when we talk about the actual RAM size which comes with your devices, is always low, or it is always less, you can say. Okay. And most importantly, every device, especially when we talk about your laptops or computers, they already have some preloaded programs which consume large amount of your system RAM, and those programs wherein you cannot disable them, because there are some startup programs which will help you to perform the boot operation, so you cannot even delete them. So they are also actually have an access to your RAM size. So altogether your RAM size becomes smaller by the end of the time. So you have to always make sure that to make your application run smoothly, how you can make the best use of RAM, how you can maximize your RAM. So that's it. So let's move to the next. Next we had topic is performance and battery life. Okay, so performance and battery life is something which is a very important characteristics when we talk about the devices, because when we are writing any code, the performance and battery life always goes hand in hand, because at times some application requires performance, whereas some application requires a good battery life. So depending on applications which you are running into your background and which you are having an access to it, that actually decide what they want. But at the end of the day, both of them are equally important, because if you have a good battery life, the performance will be high. Okay, because performance is not only in terms of your configuration, that is your RAM size, your hard disk drive, and so on. It is not just with respect to the storage, but it is also with respect to the battery life, the device which you are running, how much it is running all the day. So that is also equally important. So these are the two factors which is always keeps going on and on together, and which is important, or you can say essential. Because when we talk about optimization with respect to your application, we need both of them. And at times there are some devices wherein they run from a low battery. So in that case, you can either have a battery backup with you all, or either in that case you can have your power cells which will help you to keep your battery on for all the day. So it depends on what you want, because if you have a good battery life, whatever you are giving an inputs or whatever reactions you are giving to your system, that will spontaneously respond back. If your battery is low, the performance starts degrading, because they are not able to take your inputs, and not they are going to process your output. So that is also important. A battery life is also plays an important role. So most of your embedded devices, they comes with an limitation, that is your battery. So you always need to have a battery backup for you to make your devices, which are usually referred as resource constrained devices. So that is always advisable that you should have a battery backup for you with in case of those devices. So to make, or you can say to enhance your battery life, you have to always make sure that you let your device turn off, complete your entire processing as soon as possible, and put your devices into sleep mode. The more you put it into a sleep mode, the more battery life will be enhanced. Okay, so basically you should complete your coding task quickly, let them rest for a while, and then you can get back to work again after some point of time. So when we talk about letting your devices to sleep, in that case the software applications which you are using, that they also have to be equally optimized, because the more quicker your running of your code is done, the sooner the hardware can go to sleep. So that is also very equally important. So your software should also work fast. They need to be optimized so that your overall performance of hardware and software can be maximized. So the one way of technique to maximize your code, that you should always go for event driven model rather than going for a polling model. So event driven model is something, the model which have your inputs ready. You just have to put your inputs, you have to run the code, and the output will be get quicker. That is your event driven model, where they ask for events, or you can say set of inputs, and as soon as you give your set of inputs, it gives you the desired output. So those are those model which will quickly give you results, and if they give you quicker result, you can let your device sleep for a while, rest for a while, and increase the performance. So that is why it is always suggested that if you want to have an performance and battery life maximized, then you should let your devices sleep in the lower power state mode for a longer time, and make your task, divide your task, or make your task easy for the devices to make them run. Okay, so that's your performance and battery life. Next, we had libraries. So when I talk about libraries, this is nothing but, you can say, a collection of pre-compiled routines that your programs or applications uses, because all the libraries are mostly used by your computer application, and using these libraries, your functioning of your software programs takes place. At times, these routines are also called as modules, and libraries are very much important because they will help you to store your routines, and whatever functions which you are accessing, you don't need to explicitly link them. It is already linked by your libraries, and you just have to simply use them into your program and make the program run. So libraries are very much important because they will help you to make your source code run. So at initial step, in the very first place, we have to mention all the libraries, or you can say initialize all the libraries which you are going to use, so that you can correspondingly use their functions as well. Like I've given you all example of your C++ library, which is nothing but your header files, that is your stdio.h and conio.h. So this has corresponding functions like printf and scanf, and we usually use to print the output. So it is very much important that you need to add the libraries to your codes, and with the help of that libraries, whatever functions are defined into that libraries, you can easily use them into your codes. So when we talk about libraries, we are here dealing with the libraries which will help you to overcome the problem of resource constrained devices, because we know that we have dealing with embedded devices here, and my embedded devices are always low in memory, low CPU, low RAM size. There is everything which is very less in those devices. So we need to have the libraries also which are going to be lightweight. So all the libraries which we are going to study here will have a property, and that property is nothing but they are going to be lightweight in nature. Because when you talk about microcontrollers or embedded systems, they are resource constrained devices, and they also require the libraries, you can say, or operating system or code which is going to be lightweight in nature. So the first library which we are going to deal with is LWIP. So it stands for a lightweight IP, which belongs to your TCP IP protocol source. So it runs with low resource condition, wherein it requires a RAM size that is around 10 kbs. So this is something which is a lightweight library. Similarly, we also have a UIP, that is also referred as micro IP, which is also the part of TCP IP protocol suite, and it also runs with a lesser RAM size, which is usually in kilobytes. So this library is basically doesn't save anything themselves into the buffer, nor they save the incoming packets, nor they save, or you can say store the outgoing packets. They just have an acknowledgement that whatever has been sent has been received successfully. That's it. Apart from them, they don't store anything, because these libraries are working on resource constrained devices which have low power, low memory, and low RAM size. So they also can't store anything, just there will be a communication between the devices. Then we have next library, that is UCLIBC. So this is a library which is used with your GNU, that is basically used into a Linux system. So this is the set of library which will help you to change the code, and you don't need to recompile the source code every time. Once you have made the changes, it does the recompiling on its own. So this saves some amount of memory, and it maximizes the utilization of the RAM size. Next, we have atom threads. So atom threads here refers to the atom is nothing but the single, and thread is nothing but a single thread which are used for communication. This is again a lightweight real-time scheduler, you can say, which is used into for your resource constrained devices. So here you can use your code at any point of time, you can run them, and there is a scheduler which will help you to have multitasking tasks over your devices. Next, last, we have a BusyBox. So when I talk about BusyBox, it's actually not a library, but you can say the collection of useful Unix utilities which act as a small executable program and which are useful for providing, you can say, a shell environment or commands over your Linux platform. So the main important point here is that these are all your lightweight libraries which will work over your resource constrained devices, because resource constrained devices are one which are suffering from low memory, low CPU, and low sizes. So these libraries will help you to have a seamless communication between your devices, or you can write the source code also with the help of these devices, and they will not take much of your memory. They will take a very less memories, and they will help you to do the communication. Next, we are moving to the topic, that is debugging. Okay, so when we talk about debugging, this is a very important activity during the software execution process, because at times when we are running the code, we don't get the desired output. So to understand that where we have made mistake or where the initialization is went wrong, we are going to do the debugging. So basically, when I talk about debugging, it is nothing but the process which will help you to understand your code line by line and understand the corresponding inputs with the corresponding outputs. So debugging is a very important activity during the software development process. It helps you to check the code at line by line and will help you to understand that where there is a problem, and accordingly you can correct it. So whenever we are writing a code, it is very much important that we should make sure that we have to check the code by running it. So when we are checking the code by running it and we don't get the desired output, then we start with this debugging activity, because then you understand that there is something called as a bug into your code, and you need to identify the area, or you can say a line where the bug is there. So for that, we do the debugging activity. So in embedded system, this situation is really frustrating, because here you are going to not deal with just software part, but you are also going to deal with the hardware part, because you are going to have a breadboard. Over that, you are going to make some physical connections, and if there is something went wrong there, you don't know, and you won't be able to identify that where I have made the mistake. So in that case, you have to check each and every physical connection, you have to reconnect them, and then you have to identify it. But in case of your software, the debugging is very much possible, because here you're going to set some breakpoints. You're going to check the values of variables and expressions, and accordingly you're going to correct it, and you will get the output in the way you want. But in case of embedded platforms, you don't have this facility. Then in that case, you have to do the connection again and again. You have to check every connection whether it has been made correctly or not. So we can conclude that debugging in the software is something which is very easy, which you can do it by setting the breakpoints, by setting some set of condition, checking each and every condition which you have made written into your codes. You can evaluate the expressions, whatever you have written into your code. You can check the assumptions, whether it has been done correctly or not, by making the code run by run and seeing what are the outputs and the corresponding inputs given to the same. But in case of embedded, you can't do this. So we need a mechanism that will help you to do the same. So in embedded platform, usually we go for a Linux platform. And what the Linux platform, we have a something which is called as GNU debugger. Okay, so this is one of the remote utility of debugging which you can say, and which will help you to have the debugging done for your front end, that is nothing but your physical design, but also for the back end, that is your software design. So you can do the debugging of all the physical connections which you have made for your breadboards. Similarly, you can also do the debugging of your software code which you have written the code for the same. So this is usually, again, you can say it checks all the serial connections, it checks all the corresponding inputs and outputs, and accordingly it will give you the results. Okay, so here there is a GNU debugger which will help you to check all the physical connection, and in case if there is any error into a physical connection, that can be rectified with the help of the GNU debugger. Similarly, if there is any you can say code which is incorrect, that also can be corrected using your GNU debugger. Okay, so we can conclude that debugging is an important activity into the software development process, even in the process of software application development, because every code which ever you are designing, you can never say that this code is 100% bug free. At any point of time, due to any initialization, due to any external dependencies, errors or bugs arises, and because of that your software application stop working. So it is always suggested that you should do the debugging at the end of your software compilation is done, so that if in case if there is any bug or any error, you can rectify them at the initial stage only. Okay, so that's it for the day. We have completed chapter number 8 revision. Thank you everyone.